Win number one is the priority at a bit of a crossroads fight coming up this weekend at bantamweight. We have the monster Damon Blackshear, the former CFFC champ. He's going to be taking on Novo União's own Luan Lacerda. And if we talk about gaining stock in a loss, Luan Lacerda gained all of that stock when he took on Cody Stamann in his UFC debut, and it seemed like an odd bit of matchmaking because Stamann was on a little bit of a heater. Lacerda was able to take advantage of the LFA fights that have been taking place recently in Brazil, but at the same time, that step up in competition was definitely something. But I mean, out of the first round, Lacerda looked amazing with his kicks. He was able to really utilize his length that he has at bantamweight against a much smaller Cody Stamann, and Lacerda got it done in that first round. The second round, it was definitely a Stamann round. And then in the third round, that's where you go, well, Lacerda definitely won it because Stamann was on the back foot. And I know a lot of people, the way that they saw that fight, the first round could have gone either way. I'm painting a Lacerda picture with his kicks. But overall, it was a very, very good fight out of Luan Lacerda, a guy who may be kind of talked about in that pantheon of greatness at Novo União, main training partner being Jose Aldo, training with the boys. I mean, you have so many great fighters out of that gym, past and present. Rafael dos Anjos, one of those guys that's still doing the damn thing. But if you look at it overall, Luan Lacerda has a tattoo below his, right collarbone. And it says black belt in my blood. And boy, oh boy, does this guy have submissions for days. And that's what makes this fight really interesting because for Damon Blackshear, wrestling is in the back pocket. You saw him have success against his UFC debut, or in his UFC debut, which was a draw. And overall, Blackshear getting it done with CFFC, some of the regional scene in the United States. Overall, out of this fight, though, Matt, I mean, if it's a standing affair, the boxing of Blackshear, the kicks of Lacerda, if it goes to the ground, it could be a smorgasbord of fun.
If you would ask me before Lacerda's last fight how this fight would look on the feet, I would say Blackshear probably wins the majority of those moments, but personally, I was pretty impressed by how Lacerda was able to deal with a guy like Stamann who does pressure you a lot, and when you're dealing with a pressure wrestler, what do you normally not throw? Kicks, because it makes it easier for them to take you down. But Lacerda was still able to get off really effective kicks, and that's the thing. If you could do it against Cody Stamann, who may or may not have lost against Tiny Vitor Belfort his last time out, very close fight, then you should be able to do it against a guy like Damon Blackshear, who definitely hasn't proven the level of wrestling that a guy like Cody Stamann has, in the UFC at least, because for Stamann, what got him to the dance, into the top 10, into the top 8, top 7 at one point?
He only got to the top 10.
Was it only the top 10? He was a big deal at one point. Shout out the Fire Kid, Tom Dukin one. Never got talked about because I think he left and went to modeling. But for Luan Lacerda, I was very impressed by him in that loss, and I'm glad that you started it that way. That he didn't gain a lot of stock even in that loss, but for Blackshear, I think his body attacks, especially with the boxing, are going to be very important because if he's able to get close enough to Lacerda, negate kind of the wrestling from both of them, because that's what Blackshear does have at his advantage in this fight. He gets to decide whether they're on the feet or whether they're on the ground, because Lacerda does have takedowns. I would not say they are to the level or with the technique of a guy like Blackshear, who can go for single legs, can mix them in with double legs. He's a lot more dynamic with the way that he will shoot for his grappling exchanges, but like you said, every time Blackshear shoots for a takedown, it's going to put himself in probably the most dangerous position he can put himself in the fight. And that's a spot where Lacerda can not just necessarily grapple per se, but grapple on the in-betweens, because that's where he catches a lot of guys. Oh, we're going for a takedown. This is a bit of a scramble. Well, that's when Lacerda can end up in a good position and really start threatening with a lot of his grappling.
I mean, to really put it into perspective, at the time that Lacerda fought Cody Stamann, the Topology rankings, Stamann was number 31 and Lacerda was number 146. Wow. So it was a big mismatch, but Lacerda definitely looked good. And if you go back through, Lacerda was able to land some double leg takedowns of his own, which surprised a lot of people. But if you do go down through it, you go back and you rewatch some of the Lacerda fights, you'll see that he does have a Muay Thai stance, but he's kind of like a Diego Lopes is in grappling to the gym that he's out of in Mexico. A lot of strikers at Lobo Gym with, of course, Alexa Grasso and Irene Aldana, who's going to be at UFC 289. The jiu-jitsu coach of Lopes looked great against Evloev. Lacerda's the jiu-jitsu guy at a striking gym in Novo União, and he looked really good in that debut against another high-level fighter. So there's high-level fighters all over the world. You never know what you're going to get. With Blackshear, though, again, going even back to his amateur career, a win and a loss against Tony Gravely. He ended up popping onto the FNP radar. I covered the story, but the first fight that was ever covered, or at least the first fight card that was ever covered by the channel at NEF 34, home of the Brave, Blackshear won in the main event against one Aaron Lacey, and he's obviously gone on to do great things. The Shuto Brazil champ is Lacerda. The CFFC champ is Blackshear. And if you want to add more names to that, Pat Sabatini is one of his losses. Chris Mutino, he has a win over Matteo Vogel, the Canadian, who's going to be fighting on Contender Series this summer. So a lot of high-level experience, but with Blackshear, he can always fall back on that wrestling. Really likes to get the back, threaten with the rear naked choke, but he can swim through a lot of those bad positions, as can a guy like Lacerda, who you'll see threaten with some leg locks and some tricky spots to then get into some dominant positions. So when you do look at this matchup, Matt, in terms of Lacerda is actually the favorite when we look at the odds. If you look at the Tapology votes, surprise to us there to you, I'm going to say that the fans were won over with Lacerda. I'm going to say over under 67.5% for the Brazilian.
I'll say over.
You're going to say over? And it is over. So 1,359 total votes, 75% Lacerda, 70% by decision for the 25% that are Blackshear, 61% by decision. We didn't even talk about Blackshear's last fight against Frid Basharat.
A really good fighter, guys.
Yeah, Javid's really, really good. Frid has only had the one UFC fight, but when you go back and watch that, Blackshear couldn't get it going in the first, couldn't get it going in the second. In the third, he rallied back and had a good third round. The scary part for me when I look at this fight is Damon Blackshear, when he was an amateur, when he started off his pro career, is at Team Rock in Fayetteville, North Carolina, where he's from. Then he moved to Jackson Wink, and he had all the success with CFFC. He had the first fight to make his UFC debut. He loses to Frid Basharat, and what does he do? Well, he just did an interview with James Lynch, and he said, oh, I'm in Florida now. Well, where are you at in Florida? Training at American Combat Gym with Charles Rosa, but mainly at a KO Zone, which is the gym that Omar Morales recently fought out of when he took on Duncan. So when you look at this matchup, Matt, I find the camp change a little bit perplexing. I get it. You want to be a little refreshed training at a new gym. But for Blackshear, that's a big question mark on that one.
I mean, he's 12-5, though, you know? It'd be a little bit different if he was 19-1, 19-2, but the fact that he's 12-5-1, I just think he's looking to improve his game, to be completely honest with you. Like, I don't see that big of a deal with it. I understand that you might be a little bit concerned about the first camp or so, but personally, I like when people train around. You know, like we saw with Kamaru Usman, and this is going to kind of bring me into my last point. When you think about how Damon Blackshear fights and how he wrestles a lot more like a Kevin Lee character, right? He's going to take you down, get the back, and look a lot more for those submissions, whereas Lacerda fought a guy who I would say fights more like a Kamaru Usman his last time. He's going to go for the wrestling and go and try to hold you down.
When has Cody Stamann fought for takedowns?
No. He's fought in takedowns for a lot of his fights. He did that against Song Yadong. He did that against Marlon Vera. He did that against Tom Dukin way back in the day.
None recently, though.
But no, Cody Stamann in wrestling got him ranked. I understand the thing that got him unranked is the fact that he doesn't wrestle anymore. But Lacerda fought a guy who is going to threaten a lot more with his dominant wrestling. Just, my whole point is, Blackshear's going to go for the initial wrestling and then entice some of those grappling exchanges. And I think for that reason, I could see Lacerda out-scrambling him in some of those moments. So I do find myself leaning Lacerda, but if Blackshear can find himself just being really heavy on top, doing enough ground and pound to just win out on the rounds, I do think he has the wrestling advantage. So I wouldn't be surprised if he was able to spring the upset, but I do have Lacerda in the matchup.
Lacerda scares me a lot if you're going to make him a pick, because while his hands have come up as his career's gone on, his head doesn't move, and he tends to chase a lot in his fights. So he's there to be countered throughout the fight from round 1 to round 3, but he is really tricky with that jiu-jitsu. So Blackshear could definitely flow with his boxing, but I do like the kicks out of a guy like Lacerda. I do like the advancements that I've seen in a career progression. So Matt, both of us going with Brazil's Luan Lacerda in the matchup. Let us know down below in the comments section who you have. Some big time fights on this card. In the co-main event, Alex Caceres taking on the Pit, Daniel Pineda. You're not going to want to miss it. Keep it locked in with Fight Night Picks, we always say. Let's get into it.